Hello, Kara. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks so much for being here. And for those that were at our event, know that you were just one of our main keynote speakers at She Ignites, where we dove into all things you and your book and your business. And it was just, as we were just mentioning right before we hit record, the women loved hearing you, hearing your story, and just really understanding what Undaunted means to the chorus level, which is the title of your book that we have here with us today. So let's go back a little bit for our listeners that maybe don't know who you are, weren't at our event. Would you give us a little bit of a background in who you are and what it is that you do in this world?
Yes. So my day job, as I like to say, is the founder and CEO of Hint. And we're best known for this product, the water product, but we also have
Cheers.
a few other things. Cheers. Definitely. A few other things. We have lip balms and sunscreens, and we do a few other things really in the name of health. And I started this company a little over 15 years ago to get myself off of my diet soda addiction. And I never really thought diet soda was bad for me. I was a tech executive and wasn't really focused on what I was putting into my system. And really the trigger for me was I had 3 kids under the age of 4 when I left AOL, and I had developed terrible adult acne, which I never even had as a teenager. And my energy levels had really collapsed, and I had gained a bunch of weight and could not lose weight. And so I started dieting and counting calories and thinking that that was the answer. And then when I didn't understand the ingredients, when I happened to be looking at my diet soda can one day, I just decided to test it and see whether or not it did anything, not really thinking that it would. And 2.5 weeks later, I lost over 20 pounds. I got rid of my adult acne, and my energy levels came back. And so it was that moment when my curiosity, frankly, was just driving me. And I thought, on the one hand, I'm interviewing for roles in tech, and then I'm thinking all the time about the fact that my drink was actually making me not as healthy as I wanted to be. And I thought, there are so many people out there that just are not on this program, that don't really understand this. And maybe I can actually launch a product that would really help people. I had been making my own kind of Hint at-home concoction with just slicing up fruit and throwing it in the water. And again, not thinking that that was really a product, but when friends were saying to me, gosh, like, this is really good, you should just make this and make it in batches, do it. And that's when I got the idea. I thought, maybe this is a side hustle. There wasn't even that term almost 16 years ago, but I thought, I'm a tech executive. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm just having a lot of fun. And that was the beginning of Hint. So
amazing. A lot of people don't ever take the DIY component of whatever it is that they're kind of hacking together or having as like a side hustle. They don't necessarily take that to expansion in a way that you have. So you have this friend that suggests this as an idea, but then you're carrying it through multiple steps, multiple different like hurdles to actually get this to be a product that people can purchase. What did you have to tap into to continue that resiliency along the way, to carry it through from something that just served you to something that could serve millions of other people?
Well, I always say that sometimes if you think too much about the end, right, then you'll never get past the beginning. And I think it is so true when I think back on the first few days of Hint. I was sharing this story the other day with someone that I think there were moments when I had this great idea that I'm going to go get it on the shelf at Whole Foods. But then when I got in the car and I thought, do I really want to do it today? Maybe he's not going to be there. Maybe he's going to say no. And then I thought, nope, I'm going to go do it. And I'm just going to see what happens. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? And that was, the beginning, because I think that the thing that I always try and remind people is that while I didn't have any experience in the beverage industry and had never started my own company before, I had done something in tech that was pretty great. And I launched inside of a large company, America Online, their e-commerce and shopping. But I didn't know what I was doing in the beginning of that. And then it got to be $1 billion in revenue for the company. I had a team of 200 people that significantly helped me to grow that. But I thought it's okay not to actually know all the answers. If you just go out and you just go try and, do your best, then, you'll oftentimes really surprise yourself. So that was the thing, that no one was going to take my previous experience away from me. And I think that that's often so important for people to remember when they're weighing risk, I guess is the best way to think about it. It's just, when you've done some really great things in the past, then you're able to say, well, I've done those things. Maybe they seemed hard in the beginning. Maybe I could go back to doing those things if this doesn't work out. But in the meantime, I'm really curious about it. No one's doing it. And so I might as well, go and give it a try.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of times, especially what I hear from the women in our group, is how do they know when to keep going, and how do they know when to take like the universal signs that it shouldn't be a thing? And
That's
you've really learned to continue on the path and shift where you've needed to go. So how did you do your risk assessment, and how did you know when to keep going or when to I don't want to use the word give up, but essentially kind of change course if something, what you just kind of kept hitting the wall?
Yeah, I think that as you're moving along, I mean, certainly I think sales is always, what is the customer actually saying about your product, whether or not they're interested in buying it. I've always said to people that the faster you can get your product or service out in the market for consumers to decide whether or not they think it's worth paying for, then, that will really help you to decide whether or not you should continue moving forward. But I think that that's really the key thing, is actually getting to that point. And so I kept saying that I'm not going to really make decisions until I've got it in the hands of consumers. And from day one, getting it on the shelf at Whole Foods, it's interesting. We did something which is very common in the tech industry and is now very common as well, but on products and services. But in the tech industry, I don't know when or how it really started. Maybe it was like a customer service issue because there were a lot of people that didn't really understand how to put tech into place. I don't really know, but it was the phone number and the email was always kind of front and center. And so for people to reach out and figure out, and frankly, I think it's gotten worse than it was even 16 years ago, to sort of figure out how to get into, get some customer service.
Yes.
Help. But that's another story. But with the beverages, nobody was really doing that. And we stuck a phone number and an email on the bottle, and literally from day one, from getting our bottle on the shelf at Whole Foods, we were hearing from consumers. And again, like, those conversations were so interesting. I mean, they were not only sharing very similar things that I thought, which was that the product helped them drink water without having sweeteners in it, but also I was hearing about this new disease that, frankly, I had never really heard about, called type 2 diabetes, and how people were, I mean, they don't know me, right? I'm just on the other end of the customer service line. They don't even know I'm the founder, right? Don't tell anybody. But I was the one answering the phone calls and the emails in the beginning. And, they were sharing these things about health and how hard it was and how they really felt that like their insulin levels would be increased by diet sweeteners. And, the more I've learned about type 2 diabetes, frankly, over the last 15 years, I mean, at that time, it was about 2% of the population had type 2 diabetes or prediabetes. Today, it's like 45%. It is actually the number one indicator in women for heart disease. And so I always share with people that that if you learn that you have type 2 diabetes and, you actually have a chance of doing something about it before getting heart disease, because that is a much more serious situation. And so it's sort of a, blessing in disguise in some ways, because it is very reversible if you know how to deal with it. And so anyway, I would hear more and more from customers that a bottle of water was the thing that was helping people to change something in their life that was that important to them. And I thought, that is crazy on a lot of levels. And so you and I talked at your meeting a bit about this, but it's fascinating to me because I really believed that by launching Hint, that just for less than $2 a bottle, I could actually help change health in people's lives. And that was my purpose. And so I would let people know that the beverage was it was a tool to me. I never really thought, okay, I'm going to go and work at a beverage company. That was just never something that I ever thought was in my life. And, but what I saw was this idea of helping. And it's something that, I really share, pretty broadly with people now too, where you can be an entrepreneur and you can go and do, lots of different things, but to actually be, now they term it a mission-driven or purpose-driven entrepreneur that is really trying to help others. I mean, certainly after COVID, I mean, to be able to, help people, I think is something that is a very powerful thing. And even on those really hard days and tiring days, you feel like, there's people depending on you and people who, not only want your product, but are really asking for your health and your help in changing their health. So I just had an email from a friend of mine who I hadn't talked to in about 6 months. And she reached out to me and said, "Oh, I just saw you on a podcast and that she listens to." And she said, "I meant to tell you that my mom, after years of trying to decide if she was going to do something about this, she had gastric bypass surgery. And she said that the only thing that she could switch to for her drinks, because she used to drink a lot of soda and she couldn't drink soda anymore, was Hint, because she just could not stomach water. And she said that if she never would have found those sodas years ago, she doesn't think that she would have run into these challenges. And again, like these notes that I get from people, I'm convinced that the soda companies, they don't get these emails. Right. It's just a very different, situation. So so I think it's just having that connection, I guess, with the customer is really, I think that's the key thing when I think about, in a long-winded way of answering your question, when I think about how do you know, I think if you can figure out how to get that connection with the customer early on, and I mean, frankly, it will always be there for our customers. It's like you just learn so much. And sometimes you don't necessarily know what to do with it at that moment. I mean, I have many days where I'll be sitting here thinking about something or hear about a new disease like type 2 diabetes. And then I'll start to hear about it more and more and more. Cancer patients drink our product a lot when they go through chemotherapy, that it masks the metallic taste. And I'm not making any health claims. I'm just saying that I get these emails all the time. And I think it's a really powerful thing to be a founder and a CEO of a company that you feel like you're helping people, and they're just saying you're helping me stay alive and you're helping me know I can do it. I mean, that's a really incredible feeling.
Yeah, I can imagine. So it sounds like at the core of it too, it's just about listening to the right people for that feedback and guidance to help keep you on your path and journey. And I love that you guys just have like open communication with your consumers, and it's done very well. It's also probably led to a lot of the innovation
Mhm.
that you guys have. I'm right now drinking the sparkling version of Hint, which
I
PS
love
is
I love
the
it.
best sparkling. We consume so much sparkling water in our household. And as soon as I read your book because I heard you on a podcast and was like, oh my gosh, we got to try the water, got the water shipped in, got the sparkling water because our household just guzzles it all down. And we're like, yep, not going, anything else that we try is not, does not compare. So
Yeah.
thank you for,
It is a real, I'm proud of that product. It's a really,
yeah,
really great product. And and it really, it's funny because it's a very competitive industry, the carbonated industry.
right.
Obviously, there's a lot of them, but I think, the key difference that our consumers share with us is, I mean, it really is the taste. And
Yeah.
it really, and, we're using real stuff, which unfortunately, the word natural does not necessarily mean real.
That's what I was so surprised about when I read it in your book. And that's what
Yeah.
got me to these other products that I was drinking and like, wait a second, how natural is this really? And that's, I mean, as somebody that I feel like I read labels pretty well, we try to keep a healthy household around here. That opened up my eyes and worlds. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? That was one part of your book that just really stood out to me, that this is like your product is really natural and there's a completely different definition for other products that can actually use that term natural, but you guys really are.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when, again, hadn't been in the beverage industry, and I was just like, you like a consumer who was just kind of
Yeah.
thinking
Mhm.
there's the food police or drink police out there that are watching it
Right.
all, and they eventually put it on the shelf. And I remember being I was never a vitamin water drinker. I mean, 15, 16 years ago, they didn't even have a diet version of vitamin water, but it was really, I mean, there was that hockey stick. I mean, it was really taking off on the
Oh yeah.
shelf. And I remember uh shortly after I had come up with the idea for Hint, I would hear about vitamin water from a lot of these store, the people who are making the decisions. And so one day I looked at the label on the vitamin water label, and it had more calories in it than a can of Coke. And I had a friend who drank a ton of vitamin water, and I was like, so why do you drink it? And besides it tasting good, like, I'm just curious because it was just curious. And she said, because it's natural and it has vitamins in it and it's called water. And when I shared with her that it had more calories in it than a can of Coke, and there was it was loaded with sugar, she just couldn't believe it. Right. And that's when I started to think about this term healthy perception versus healthy reality. And for me, it was diet
Mm.
soda. It was just that I thought it was healthy. Now, if you go and talk to these beverage companies that have come up, with these different names for products, including natural and, all the rest of the little terms that they have. I had many conversations with Coke and Pepsi executives, for example, who will say that diet is not intended to be healthier. And I'm like, really? Because most people think that
Mhm.
that's where you guys are going with it, right? You say sugar and soda are bad, juice is bad, and then you've got diet and that's good, and it's like less calories and all of this stuff. So that was kind of my first epiphany. But then when I started looking at all the ingredients, and I'll pick on vitamin water while I started there, I started looking at all the ingredients, and many similar ingredients to soda.
Mhm.
Again, they didn't even have a diet version back then. But then I started looking at some of the words that were in the vitamin water, and I started looking them up. And one of them, now I'm drawing a blank on the name, but it's cockroach wings. And
Oh,
it's like, but you wouldn't recognize the name. But when you Google it, it actually comes up. And so I called the vitamin water number and I said, so what do you guys use cockroach wings for? And I mean, even the person answering the phone didn't know. I mean, she was just like, wait, what? What are you talking about? And then somebody came on the phone from the marketing department and they said, oh, it's used for coloring. So the reds and the purples. And I thought, that's nasty. I mean, I would
yeah.
never like want, but again, it's considered natural. And so, and then, the dirty little secret amongst whenever people argue with me about these, like stevia, for example, is like the diet sweetener of the hour. I mean, that is what everybody uses. It used to be whatever, saccharin and sucralose and lots of different NutraSweet. But today it's stevia. And the biggest problem is stevia is a leaf, it's a plant. And so it is natural. But the problem is that unless you go and buy it at like a health food store, what the food and the soda companies do is that they process the leaf and then they actually put it with erythritol. So erythritol is an alcohol. And so anytime you put alcohol into your system, then alcohol goes right to your liver. And so and that when you're drinking beer or you're drinking a margarita or you're drinking a glass of wine, and hopefully if you're drinking it in moderation. But the number of people who are drinking diet drinks don't have any idea what they're doing. So like the levels of, liver cancer and pancreatic cancer by people who thinking that they have been eating and drinking diet and low fat and all this stuff, it's terrible. So I always tell people like, look, if you need to have a soda and I've been on panels with doctors talking about this. I'm like, I would argue that like you have, go for the Mexican Coke or whatever, right? In full sugar, if that's what you got to do. And just do it in moderation. And so that, that I think it just really boils down to, the sad part about it really is that it's really tough for consumers to get healthy. And when I was launching Hint, this, fairly new store, Whole Foods had just launched in San Francisco where I was living. And I felt like it was, you walk in there and everything looked great and it looked really beautiful and wonderful, but it was almost like there was no longer a natural section where it was like everywhere, where it was just right. And so I always, share with people that it really is tough. And obviously it's tough because these industries where the diet industry, not only diets, but also these products that are out there. I mean, it's a multi-billion dollar industry that is filled and most people can't actually achieve what they're starting out to do. And it's really pretty simple. I mean, I think for most people that I talk to, it's you figure out first if you have a craving for salty foods or sugary foods. And like I always say to people, if I throw a, cupcake down on the counter or a bag of chips, where are you going? For me, it's a cupcake. I'm
with you.
I'm a sweet girl, right? My husband is, he loves salt. And so, but if you look at, that's what people indulge on and they have too much of it. And so if you just instead say, that's my, my poison, right? Like I got to be really, really careful and just do it in moderation and just eat as real as possible. And if you cannot figure out what is in the drink or in the food that you're consuming, then pass, and just do something else and eat. And I think more and more people are getting that, but I still believe that, I mean, up until COVID, something I talked to a lot of leaders about is that I would sit here and say to people, you really should understand what you're putting into your body, what you're putting on your skin, all of these things, because it really does. It doesn't kill you tomorrow, but it eventually catches up to you.
Right.
And people were like, oh, that's someone else's problem. I mean, they didn't really understand and frankly value health. And today, I think that that's really what COVID did, frankly,
Yeah.
for, if there's a good about that, I think worldwide people really are looking at how do I stay healthy,
Right.
and how do I keep my family healthy? And it's become much more mainstream and much more important. And so it's exciting. I mean, we went in, it's a long, crazy story, but we went into Walmart at the beginning of this year. We went in before COVID and hit, and we were planning on going into Walmart and Sam's Club, and I had concerns for many years, not being snobby, because they would say like, oh, you just like Whole Foods and Target and whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I just don't know that that's where our customer is. But I started really feeling last year that unfortunately, a lot of these stores that do have better for you food were not in some of these locations where people wanted better food and needed better food because of disease and lots of other things. And so I think it's such a huge indicator that it's like health is here to stay when, I mean, our business has just skyrocketed this year in Walmart and Sam's Club. It's not just
That's
about
amazing.
Yeah. And, people will say, well, natural and good for you food is expensive. No, I mean, you can go to Walmart and get our product for, I don't know, $1 or less a bottle, and it is more expensive at certain stores. But that's another thing that I share with people. It's like, stores control pricing. I don't control pricing. They have different margins, they have different markups, and that's what they do. And so, and a lot of people order from us direct online or go on Amazon, and we're available there too. And anyway, that's my long story about what I've learned about the food industry.
Yeah. And just ties back into the title of your book, Undaunted. Tell us why now was the time to write the book. You had all these years of experience in the industry. I mean, each and every story, like I could unpack all of this for hours with you. There are so many different stories that I just was like, oh my gosh, yes. Like each part was like just kind of solidifying, like, yep, that's what it means to be undaunted. Tell us why now to write the book.
Yeah. So I started writing the book, I guess it's almost 5 years ago now. And I didn't even know I was writing a book. It was a journal. And I was traveling a ton. And as I was joking around with somebody the other day, after a while, you go into these Holiday Inn Expresses that I'm staying at in certain towns. I don't know any people, and the waffle machines look the same. They're in the same location, and you're taking pictures of your hotel rooms. And I'm like, I don't want to watch the news anymore. And I'm like, what can I do? I'm going to start journaling. And so I start journaling, and I think I was not just I was doing it as part of Hint, but I was also doing a ton of public speaking in some of these locations. And then the Q&A at the end, somebody would ask a question, and I would respond to it. And then I would also be thinking about, oh, there's that other story. And so I would prompt myself and started writing. I was a journalism major. I mean, I always really enjoyed writing, but I started writing and journaling. And then finally, after, 4.5 years, it was 600 pages of, notes. And I thought, gosh, maybe I should bind these, because there's so many stories in here. And when I would meet with entrepreneurs, I would share some of these things, and they'd write me either after me talking directly to them or at a conference, they'd say, wow, what you said was just so, so key. And I've always felt that just by helping people, I mean, like most humans, right? It's just, you feel good, and it's like a good feeling. And I thought, gosh, maybe I should just bind this and just give it to people. I mean, if I can just make a lot more people feel like they can do it, and that here's my story. And it was an interesting process, because I ended up speaking to a friend of mine who's written a couple of books, and she said, you should definitely do it. I mean, you've got plenty of pages. And the fascinating thing about writing a book, frankly, was that I had an amazing agent that I was introduced to. And when we finally went to shop the book with a bunch of the publishers in New York, there were a handful of publishers that really wanted me to write a different book. And they wanted me to write a book about, being a female and, a very male dominated industry. I'm like, which male dominated industry? I mean, there's tech and there's beverage. Like they're both pretty bad. I mean, and I said, I guess, I mean, there were certainly days and moments, but that didn't stop me. And so finally Harper Collins really got me and got sort of, but their concern in launching it, frankly, was that I think the appeal will just be to female entrepreneurs. And that is not it at all. I mean, I've heard from, our sales are 50% men as well as women. And I think what's fascinating about men in particular, who have read the book and some of the stuff that they're sharing with me, mostly on LinkedIn, is that they're, to be your authentic self and actually say that you're scared and that you're putting yourself in uncomfortable positions to not necessarily, you don't know whether or not you're going to be successful or not, is a lot. Right. And I think that it really, that the idea of, being at the top of your game in an industry, I think there's no better time to go and try. And, that is really the message that so many people are getting. And I'm excited. And there's another one that totally I did not expect, which I think I'm still sort of thinking on. I'm really interested in it, is that I'm Gen X generation, and I've had a ton of millennials who have written to me saying, where are the rest of you? Where are the rest of the Gen Xers actually saying that it was hard and that it wasn't easy, but you did it? Because there's a lot of women who have written books who they typically write the books after they're in retirement. They're not still operating a company. They were fired, they're, and I think that there needs to be more examples of people saying, it wasn't easy. And, here's how I got out of it. Here's sort of how I compartmentalized it over here for a little bit, and I still went home to my family and hugged them all and said, I hate this day, but I'm going to, I'm still going to go and, and I'm going to still, keep moving forward. And that's the stories that I think so many people need to hear. So.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I am so thankful that you did write the book and you are so honest about the truth, behind the success and what, can come up for a lot of people, because not enough people talk about it. Like you've said, like your readers have echoed. And the part for me in the book that stood out the most was when you talk about the Starbucks story, and the title of that chapter, when you start to talk about that, is transform setback into opportunity. And I think that's the part of the book that spoke the loudest to me. It was just like, wow, like, in a time where that would bring just some pretty hard news to deal with, would also maybe impact the like, man, this company maybe doesn't see the value anymore. Like maybe some of the self-worth questions that kind of come into play.
Totally.
All of that just starts to swirl. And then watching that transformation in the book was so powerful. So I just wanted to point that out and say thank you for that.
Thank you. And it's a moment too when I tweeted this out the other day. I was really feeling like we've all been through something, and to some degree over the last year, some have had harder days than others, and I really feel like you need to take time to really celebrate that we've all been through something, right? And it's a lot. And I think that you have to figure out, what did you learn, right? Did you learn values and like what you really care about? Did you learn what you don't really want to do? And I think that there was a monumental shift that went on in so many people's lives over this, last few months in particular, as we got out, hopefully, that is really, really important. And, again, sometimes you can't, when you're in it, it's uncomfortable. It's, hard, you cry, right? You just think like, I don't know, but you have to know that you will get out of it. Right. And sometimes, you take those lessons and frankly, I think valuing maybe you've had a lot of really challenging times and maybe you've had a bunch of failures. I always, share with people, now's the time to sort of learn from your mistakes and move forward. And it's a really important thing. And, as Steve Jobs used to say, the dots eventually connect. And I'm such a huge believer in that it's like, you don't necessarily know why that was there at the moment. And, for me, I mean, I was in tech and I never really loved it. I enjoyed it, but I didn't love what I was doing every single day. And I think for me, it was a necessary step to be able to get into beverages. And now over 50% of our business is direct to consumer. And, and there's tons of beverage companies that are trying to figure out, how do I do it? And they don't have that experience coming from tech. Right. And so they don't sort of think like that and think about the data and think about, lots of things that go along with that industry. And we've really married two industries. And I think that it's all part of my journey. And, it's just, but again, so many people don't stop and think about it. Instead, they think, oh, that was a horror show, right? Like that was just a really bad. And I'm like, no. You learned something about yourself, right? You learned, I mean, let's say you work for a bad boss or you couldn't raise money or you couldn't, like, what are those things? And really that it's something else that I think about a lot that people always say, like, forget about the past. And I'm like, I don't know. You could actually learn a lot of things about yourself and kind of think like, why didn't that work? And why, should you have been, I mean, for me, I've shared this story with a lot of people. If you're out raising money, and I used to think like, oh, okay, there's a bunch of venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. But when I went and pitched a bunch of them in the early days, none of them, and they said, oh, sorry, we're not interested and really enjoyed meeting you or whatever, turned me down, a nice way. What I realized is none of them had actually ever invested in food and beverage. And so, people would say, oh, don't take it personally. And I mean, you can't help but take it personally for a minute. But then when you really look at, I mean, your most valuable thing as an entrepreneur is your time. And I think that for me was just something that I just wasn't paying attention to. If you're, knocking on doors and asking people to invest in you and they've never invested in a beverage company before, your chances are low. Not to say that you shouldn't do it, but if you have limited time, you probably shouldn't. You should probably find somebody else that, really is comfortable with investing in your industry. So, so many lessons.
Amazing. So many lessons. Thank you for your authenticity. Thank you for your truth. Thank you for putting this story out there. Where can people find the book?
Yeah.
Tell us where they can purchase.
Local bookstores, of course, but also on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and also on Audible. So, I mean, it's amazing how so many books. I mean, of course, I knew what Audible was before, but a friend of mine from America Online is now running Audible, and he was sharing with me that, I think their sales have tripled since from a year ago. I mean,
I'm sure people have more time to learn new things.
Totally. So it's amazing. And and I think, more than anything, it really, I love reading. And I think I've just found that it's not only a way to escape, but it's also just a way to sort of really sit with something. And I've had people reading the book and, they've got little post-it notes on all these different areas. And you don't have to be a beverage executive, I think, to really understand this book. And
not at all.
Yeah, it really is, hopefully going to take people to a place where it helps them really have the right courage.
Yeah. I'm excited we have our mastermind group reading it right now. I just sent everybody a copy, and everybody that I know that's read it has just had such amazing takeaways. So thank you again. Everybody should go grab the book. Where can people connect with you from here? You've mentioned LinkedIn. I know you're pretty active on Instagram. Where's your favorite platform to connect with people?
Oh, all of them. I'm on Kara Goldin with an I. And I depending on what you like hearing, I'm pretty active on Twitter, actually. It's like, it's sort of it's my jam on Twitter. I love Twitter, and it's fun. And then obviously LinkedIn and Instagram and
the usual suspects.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Kara, thank you so much for your time. It was such a pleasure to see you again. Thanks for being here and sharing more of your story. We really appreciate it.
You too. Thanks, everybody. And definitely let me know what you think of the book.